Hello and welcome to another Farbank Fly Fishing School episode. In this episode, we figuratively venture across the pond and dip into the highly successful fish catching world of Euro Nymphing. Unlike regular nymphing, Euro Nymphing techniques don't use a regular type of strike indicator, has a completely different casting style to normal fly fishing techniques, and uses incredibly specialized gear, from the rod to the reel, the line, leader, and even the flies. On that note, do check your local fishing regulations, make sure you're allowed to use more than a single fly, as most Euro Nymphing techniques uses teams of 2 and 3 flies. Now, without doubt, it is one of the most effective ways of catching trout in a river. So before you can say pêche à la mouche, let's take a look at what is so special about this style of fly fishing. So, what is Euro Nymphing? Well, Euro Nymphing is a style of nymphing that evolved back in the late 80s, 90s really. It started to become popular in Poland and Czech and spread out throughout Europe. And it's just different ways of fishing nymphs. And one thing about Euro Nymphing you will never ever use is one of these, a bobber. We don't want those. Let's talk about Euro Nymphing, what you do use, and why would you use Euro Nymphing? Well, the simple answer is you catch a ton of fish. You catch so many more fish than your regular nymph and indicator system. It literally sweeps up and sucks in all the fish in the river, and you can catch a lot of fish. And a lot of people want to catch fish, so it's a good way to do it. It is quite technical. It's very different from regular fishing, and it requires completely different gear. And what that is, well, we'll take a look at the new gear in the very next chapter. As I alluded to, the gear for Euro Nymphing is radically different than any form of regular fishing. Even the rod is different. So a typical Euro Nymphing rod is going to be quite long, 10'6" or 11 foot, so much longer than a 9'5" weight. It's going to be a bit lighter in sizes, maybe 2, 3 line sizes, maybe a 4, but not really a 5 and 6 weight. A couple of things to note about the rod. You'll see that the reel is very far down, as far down from the rod as possible. And that's because one thing that's really important when you're Euro Nymphing is that you want to hold the center of the rod and have the absolute pivot point balanced in your hand. And with these long rods, the longer the rods are, the further down this reel needs to be to counterbalance that rod length. So generally you're going to find these rods have reels further down. You'll also find that the rods have a very, very soft tip. Sensitivity and visibility are everything in this whole game of Euro Nymphing. So the tips are much softer than your regular rods. And even to the point of your rod rings, your rod guides here, as you can see, these are not your regular snake guides. They're little single leg rod rings. They're lighter in weight. They don't block the rod in terms of like locking the rod. It can give them a little bit more flexibility and sensitivity. So the whole rod is a very different thing from your regular 9'5" weight. Now, if you get into Euro Nymphing, it's absolutely worth buying those specialty rods. But again, to start off with, you could probably get away with your 9'5" weight or 9'4" weight. But when you get into it, these specialty rods will make a big difference. The reel is no different, right? The reel on here, I've got a Sage ESN, a Euro Nymphing rod, and the reel is going to be quite a bit heavier than your normal reel. One of the things that these rods have and these reels have is they have little different weights you change. So this is a small weight. Now, if I'm fishing a rod that's about 10 foot long, I'm going to add this weight to this reel. It's a shorter rod, doesn't need so much weight at the back end, so that balances it. If I'm fishing a longer rod, 11 foot long, I'm going to have a much heavier weight. That makes the reel heavier and brings that balance. I just want to keep the balance in the center of my hand. So keep that in mind. Make sure you get a nice reel that balances it. And then the fly line, well, the fly line, that's a very, very different thing too. While you could probably get away with your 9'4" weight rod and your regular reel, you just cannot get away with your regular reel gold. And let's just take a look. When we go to this line here, you'll see that the line's got a thin diameter. Right, I'll pull the line off here. There's a leader coming off. All right, the first thing is this line's got a bright orange tip. That's important, right? Visibility is everything. But as you pull more and more line off, you'll find that this line isn't getting any thicker. Not like your regular weight forward where you get to the fat part. And that's because you don't cast the fly line. The fly line is not loading the rod. The fly's cast. This is for sensitivity and visibility. So it's got to be as thin and as light as possible. So Euro nymph lines tend to be very, very light, very, very thin, have a little bit of a color at the top end. And there's a couple of options on that. Again, if you're starting off Euro nymphing and you're really getting into this game and you want to get the specialty gear, just get yourself a line that says Euro nymph. It'll be thin like I just showed you, be super sensitive, it'll have that high color tip on the front end. Perfect, that's just the right line. Easy to cast, very, very sensitive. But if you're just dabbling in Euro nymphing and you kind of want to, I just want to try my regular 9-foot, I've got my Rio Gold, how should I do it? Well, you can get a thing called a shorty. This is a Euro nymph shorty. It's only about 20 foot long. And all you do is you loop the back end of that onto your regular fly line. And you've got 20 feet of Euro nymphing line. So absolutely, just go down the river and start Euro nymphing. Check it out and see how this technique works. So you can definitely adapt and cheat with a little specialty line like this shorty on your regular lines. On the front of that line, right, we've got to have a leader, just like anything else. And again, with this Euro nymph, everything about leaders and everything about the whole rig is all about sensitivity and visibility. So the first thing we'll notice about the leader that we attach on is the butt section is white. The entire leader is white. I want to see it. The other thing is much thinner butt diameter than your regular leaders. And again, thinness means it's very much more sensitive to a stop or a check or a fish grab. So your Euro nymph leaders are going to generally be white or colored. They're going to be quite long. They're going to be lightly tapered. And they'll get down. And at the front end of that Euro nymph light leader, where it comes down to the end, then you attach a bit of highly visible tippet material called two-tone tippet. Two colors, we've got a bit of pink, we've got a bit of chartreuse. This is the indicators that you utilize when you're Euro nymphing. You're going to be watching these. And those go in at the end of your regular leaders. And then on the very end of that is a little tippet ring to which you actually attach your tippet material and your flies. As I said, these leaders are quite long, they're quite specialized, and what you're looking for is you're just looking for a packet of leader. So here, for example, is one we make at Rio. This is a Euro nymph leader called a technical Euro nymph leader. You can see it's white. It's pretty long, it's 14 feet in length. And where a lot of people get kind of mixed up, they look at this label and go, it says 2X and 4X. What does that mean? Well, 2X is the white, so the line tapers down to a 2X white, and on the front end of that is a 4X diameter two-tone tippet. Just give you an idea how to translate that. So that's a really good leader. You loop that onto the end of your Euro nymph line, or you could needle knot it. Some people don't like the loops going up and down the rod rings and catching when you're playing a fish. So if that's the case, you cut the two loops off and just needle knot or nail knot the leader butt to your Euro nymph front end. And then on the tippet ring you generally want is your 2 mil, your little trout, small 2 mil tippet ring. If you buy a leader, like a Euro nymph leader, it has the tippet ring. But if you're setting your own one up, you want to start off from scratch and you buy that two-tone tippet, you want to make sure you get yourself a couple of tippet rings and rig up your whole leader with 2 mil tippet rings. The tippet rings really aren't serving any purpose when you're fishing. They're not weight to get down. What they are very fast ways to change droppers, change flies, change your rigs. Fast, quick ways, change the distance between flies, which is something you'll do a lot when you're Euro nymphing. So tippet rings are essential. And then the two-tone tippet we talked about, well, you can just get a two-tone tippet material and you can see this one is a pink and chartreuse color. This is a 2X diameter, it comes in different diameters, but basically use the length of that. And what I've learned over the years, what I like to do is I like to do a little thing like this. I like to tie two sections together with a blood knot and leave long tags, about 1 inch long. And then I'll do another one a little further up of the pink. And those long tags, you're going to fish this in a vertical orientation. These long tags are super visible in the water. You'll see a lot more takes and feel a little bit more and just have something to focus on when you've got tags like that. So as you get into your Euro nymphing, you might want to leave tags on your two-tone tippet. As I said, that's a lot more visual. The two-tone tippet goes down to a tippet ring, talked about that, and then off the tippet ring, the last thing you're going to put on is some fluorocarbon. Fluorocarbon is probably the other essential I would recommend for Euro nymphing. It's more dense, so it helps the nymphs get down, and it's almost completely invisible underwater. So it's a really good material to put on. 5X is perfect for most things. You could go 6X with really clear, slow water and spooky fish. You might want to go up to 4X with big fish and bigger flies, but generally your 5X fluoro is going to be the perfect setup. And then the last thing, well, the flies, even the flies are different. My gosh, talk about difference. The flies are going to be weighted. That's not different from regular flies. They're going to be weighted with tungsten beads. You're going to have a few caddis ones. You're going to have a few worms here and there. You're going to have your Baetis patterns and your general pheasant tail nymph patterns. They're all going to have beads on. We're going to look at how you rig these in a minute, but the basic thing is you're going to have weight that hangs your nymphs vertically down, and that's why you want the tungsten. And again, you have a selection of sizes and you have a selection of bead sizes according to the depth and you're fishing and the current speed. But where these Euro nymphs differ particularly is they are tied on jig hooks like that. Look at this beautiful thing. I don't know if you can see it, but the eye is here. The eye is not sideways to the hook. It's the same plane as the hook point. That's a jig hook. And that's because when you're fishing nymphs, if you have a jig hook like this, your nymph will ride hook point up on the riverbed. Brilliant, because you're going to touch the bottom a lot. You're going to snag rocks and you're going to snag boulders and sticks and weed if your fly rides point down. So most Euro nymphs are tied on a jig hook. Most Euro nymphs have these heavy beads. And to be fair, most of them are actually tied on barbless hooks. Just seems to be the way of Euro nymphing, which is a good thing. So as I said, there's a lot of specialized gear, right? When you're out there Euro nymphing, you could start with your regular 9-foot and your regular 5-weight line. You could put on your shorty, but you definitely do need those specialized leaders and those specialized two-tone tippet material and probably tippet rings and those heavy jig hook flies to have the complete setup. And once you've got all that gear, well, you've got to put it all together. And in the very next chapter, we're going to look at some of the favorite rigs that I like to use when I'm Euro nymphing. Rigging Euro nymph outfits are pretty technical as well, just like the gear. And there's ways to rig them correctly and catch a lot of fish, and there's ways to rig them incorrectly and just catch a few fish. So let's take a look at some of the fundamentals of rigging. First thing is the choice of fly. Your fly choice is based on two factors, the current speed and the depth of the water you're fishing. Why that's important is because you always want the fly, one of the flies, touching the bottom. Most rigs are going to be multi-fly rigs, so you do need to check your regulations because multi-fly rigs are not allowed everywhere. If you have regulations that are friendly and allow you to, your standard rig is going to be a 3-fly rig. Here's this two-tone tippet we talked about earlier, and here's the tippet ring. And then you'll notice that as I pull along, there's another tippet ring, and then there's a half fly hanging from that tippet ring. And then as I extend it a bit more, there's another fly hanging down off another tippet ring, wiggling away there. And as I extend it a bit further down, there's yet another fly hanging down. That's my 3-fly rig. Now, most important rule of thumb is your heaviest fly is always the end one. Whether you're fishing 2 flies or 3 flies, the heaviest fly is always the end one. That makes everything sink in a vertical manner, which is really what you're trying to achieve. So you do want your heaviest fly at the bottom. Generally speaking, you want around 20 inches. A rough guideline, can be more, can be less, but generally speaking, you want about 20 inches between each fly. So 20 inches from this fly to the middle fly. In we go. And then sort of 20 inches or so to the next fly. All these are tied off tippet rings on 5x fluorocarbon, as I mentioned in the previous chapter. And then X distance between this first tippet ring and the two-tone tippet. And that X, well, that factor is the speed and depth of the current. So if I'm fishing water that looks about 2 foot deep, I'll literally have 1.5 times the water depth between my two-tone tippet and my end fly. Not the middle fly, not the first nearest one, but the end fly. So 2 foot, I'll have 3 feet between this fly and that fly, and of course I have to adjust the spacing as a result of that. If it's 7 foot of water, I'm probably going to have 10.5 foot between this point fly and my two-tone tippet. So that's how you judge your leader length. And then, as I said, the current speed is the other factor. When you have really fast current, your nymphs, you're going to pitch them in, and your nymphs will take a bit of a while to get down to the strike zone, the bottom. That's where you really are successful, when your end fly is bumping the bottom. So in fast currents, you want flies with more weight. And what's peculiar in the Euro nymphing world is the weight is determined by the size of the bead. This is what's called a 3.8 millimeter bead. It's a heavy bead. It's the heaviest bead we make at Rio on a Euro nymph. You can go up a little bit bigger, but generally speaking, much bigger than that. And you're going to have a big problem between the size of the bead and the hook point. So 3.8 mil. And how you can tell that? Well, it tells you on the box when you buy your flies. This one says French nymph size 3.8. When you look at that box and you go, oh, what the heck is 3.8? Well, it tells you there. That's the bead size. And you can get a 3.4 and a 3 and a 2.6. They're different bead sizes. But generally speaking, that fly size and that bead size is influenced by the current. So in fast currents, I'll probably set up 2 flies, each with 3.8 mil beads here to get down. And then my top fly, where I'm allowed 3 flies, is going to be a little bit lesser weight one. And in slower currents or currents that aren't really quite as deep, then I might go to a 2.6 mil or a smaller one. That's kind of something like this. Look at these little guys here. You see, this is a nice little one. This has got a much smaller bead on. It's not going to get down so deep. So this is a good setup either for my top fly nearest the two-tone indicator, or I could fish 2 or 3 of these if I'm only in some really shallow, maybe 2-foot water that I don't really snag the bottom. So your fly weight choice is really important based on current speed, and the length between and the distance between your flies and your two-tone tippet is what's based on the depth of the water. It is technical, as I promised you. So once you've got all those gear, once you've got the gear, once you know what your rigs are and you're set up to go fishing, well, as I mentioned in the earlier chapter about fly line, the fly line's thin because you don't cast the fly line, you cast the flies, and that requires a very different casting technique for Euro nymphing. And we're going to take a look at that in the very next chapter. So here we are on the beautiful Gallatin River in Montana. We're in the canyon section, and it's a marvelous section for Euro nymphing because you've got lots of fast water. Look at all this fast water, and in the fast water there's rocks, and these rocks create these slow little pockets, and these are really good areas to target your Euro nymphing. So this is a particularly good type of water for Euro nymph style. Before we look at Euro nymphing, let's just take a look at a couple of the casting techniques because they're very different. If you fly casted a lot in your life and you've got this lovely natural casting stroke and you're super proud of how you cast your dry flies, you're going to have a slight problem Euro nymphing because there's no fly line weight, there's only fly weight. So if you do a normal cast, the cast won't work very well, and what will probably happen is you'll tangle. So you don't really make a fly cast with this. What you do instead is you do kind of a lob. Basically, when you've landed your flies and the flies swim downstream, which is your fishing technique, and the line and the flies are downstream of you, you're going to start the rod downstream of you and lift the rod, and in a kind of a circular movement do a lob. Not a cast, more of a lob. The lob is essential because that means it's not going to tangle. You don't really have a back cast. But perhaps the biggest difference between somebody who can Euro nymph successfully and who's starting off is that when you do your lob, what you don't want is your flies and leader to land at the same time because the current will grab the leader and pull the flies out too fast. So as you get into it, you want to do a lob and lift. And what the lift does, when you lift the rod before your flies land, that pitches the flies. The flies will land first in the water. They'll sink down to the bottom or to the bucket, and then your leader will land if you have any leader on the water, and you can nymph your way through the seams. So it's a good technique to practice. Lob and lift, make sure your flies land first, definitely not your fly line, definitely not your leader, make sure your flies land first. And then the only other tip I'd give you on casting these heavier nymph outfits and this light fly line is always start your rod directly opposite where you want your flies to land before you do your lob. So if I want to lob my flies upstream, I'm going to start the rod straight downstream and lob it upriver. My rod will start facing downriver, which is directly opposite where I want it to go. When you want your flies to land across river, then all you simply do is once your flies have swung round, you're going to swing the rod inside you, into the bank, directly opposite where you want those flies to land, and lob across the river. Much better way of being accurate that way than always starting with your rod downriver and somehow trying to lob it across the river, because that doesn't work. So there are some definitely different casting techniques with the Euro nymph outfit and the Euro nymph flies on there. And hopefully you've got an understanding of now how to cast those flies. And once you've got the understanding of how to cast the flies, you need to know how to fish them. And we're going to take a look at that in the very next chapter. All right, so you've got those casts dialed in. You understand the lob and the lift. Once you've got that, well, let's take a look at some fishing tactics that you could do with these Euro nymph outfits. And really the how, well, there's a lot of options of doing that. There's Czech, Polish, French, there's just variations of a theme. Basically, what you're going to try and do is you're going to pitch the line so your flies land first and kind of high stick it. The simplest way is to fish a fixed length of line and stay with whatever length of line you've got outside the rod, pitch the flies upstream of you and bring your rod tip, trying to keep the rod tip vertically above the fly line, the flies, everything in a straight line all the time. Pitch the rod upstream, sweep it downstream. You can see Chad's here sweeping the line, the flies drop, he swings the rod downstream, keeping the line straight because you've got to detect the take. We'll come on to that in a second. Another way of doing it is where you pitch the flies upstream and you slightly move the rod faster than the current, so you're leading the flies. That keeps you in touch with the flies all the time. It enables you to feel if you go over a rock to lift it. So one way is to just swing at the same speed as the current, where your leader is vertical below the rod tip. And the other way is to lead the flies by pulling the rod slightly quicker than the current. Either of those ways are working. But the key to this is you're fishing a fixed length line. Now it gets a little bit more different when you want longer line. You can French nymph it with a longer line, or you can pitch it further upstream. And when you're doing that, your left hand is going to be involved and you're going to be stripping the line in to try and keep in tension as the flies wash towards you. So when you're not fishing a fixed length and you want those longer casts, bear in mind that you want to keep stripping that line in as the fly comes towards you to keep in touch with those flies. Now once the flies have swung around and maybe you get a grab or maybe you don't get a grab, what you're trying to do is you're going to detect the take. And there's a couple of ways of doing that. You might feel something. As long as your line is tight at all stages, you might feel a little shimmer, a shiver, a twitch in the line. But a couple of other things you can do is, remember in the studio when we tied up this two-tone indicator, we left these tags, so you can watch these tags, you watch your indicator in the water here, but watch the tags in Essential. Those tags make the things a little bit easier to see. So this is more of an advanced technique where you leave tags on your knots, and those just become a much more visible point of reference for you to watch, and you might see it check in the current or pull to the side slightly, so you're watching it. Some people even take a fluorescent little dough like this and they wrap it around the knot, make it a little bit more visible, right? So you could do that as well. All depends on what you want to do, what kind of level of comfort you are at trying to detect the take. So feel the take or see the take. Now, one thing of talking about the take, as you get more into this Czech nymphing and Euro nymphing style, at the end of every single cast, when the fly is swept downstream, then you want to do a false set. You want to just imagine there's a fish there. So the fly swings downstream, you can see Chad's lines there, it's washing downstream, and now he does this low little hook set before he pitches the line upstream. You'll be surprised at how many fish are on the end of that line when you do that hook set. For some reason, the fish seem to like the nymphs curling up in the current, and they grab it. And if you do that false hook set before you make the next cast, you're going to get a lot more fish doing that than just casting away. And as I said, the other thing, the kind of what's called the French nymphing style, that's more of a distance option. When you've got the current, the area you want to fish, and it's 25 or 30 feet away, you're going to pitch the flies much more across the river. Use the length of these rods to hold as much line up off the water as you can, off those currents, and swing the line downstream, stripping if it's too long, and then swinging the line downstream as it goes past you. Again, waiting to feel the technique, that tag, that touch, something like that, or waiting to see the indicator move. So that kind of French nymphing style that you might read about really is more long leader, more long range, fishing areas of water that are not close to you, but ones that are further away, like Chad's fishing here. And the regular Euro nymphing techniques, the short line, the high sticking techniques, are where you're fishing more close range, you're wading close to the riffles, and you're getting the water where the fish are lying. And what we're talking about there is when you cover the water, you always want to start close in. And the beautiful thing about this Euro nymphing style is you can cover multiple seams at the same time. You find the first seam, you cover that seam with the short range, and then you cover a further seam by getting a bit more distance out there. You throw it further up into the slow pockets and cover the water there. So make sure you cover all the water from your one standing position, and then move upstream or downstream a couple of paces and repeat and cover as much of the water as you can doing that. And that's the great thing about these Euro nymphing techniques. So you've got to know the gear, you've got to get those casts, the flips and the pitches and the lobs and the lifts, and you've got to have these multiple range of techniques. And when you've got all those, well, I think you've got a good inkling of what Euro nymphing is. So there you have it, an in-depth look at the incredibly effective technique of Euro nymphing. Hopefully, from this episode, you now have an idea of the kind of specialized gear you need to pursue this. You've learned how to make the right kind of cast to get the best presentation and avoid tangles, and you've got an idea of the differences between Polish, Czech, and French nymphing techniques. Now, as always, I want to end this episode with a friendly reminder to do your part in keeping the river clean and the fish healthy. Look after the environment. Leave no trace of your visit to the water and treat the fish you catch with the utmost respect. Thanks a lot for watching this episode, and I hope to see you on the river one day, putting your new Euro nymphing skills to great use.